The man who has achieved perfect life possesses happiness proved by his no longer desiring of anything. What more could he desire? He could not desire anything inferior. He is united to the best. He therefore has fullness of life. If he be virtuous, he is fully happy and fully possesses the good, for no good thing escapes him. What he seeks is sought only by necessity, less for him than for some of the things which belong to him. He seeks it for the body that is united to him. And though this body be endowed with life, what relates to his needs is not characteristic of the real man. The latter knows it, and what he grants to his body he grants without in any way departing from his own characteristic life. His happiness will therefore not be diminished in adversity, because he continues to possess veritable life. If he lose relatives or friends, he knows the nature of death, and besides those whom it strikes down, know it also if they were virtuous. Though he may allow himself to be afflicted by the fate of these relatives or friends, the affliction will not reach the intimate part of his nature. The affliction will be felt only by that part of the soul which lacks reason, and whose suffering the man will not share. We must therefore contemplate the soul and her divinest part in order to discover the nature of intelligence. This is how we may accomplish it. From man, that is from yourself, strip off the body, then that power of the soul that fashions the body, then sensation, appetite, and anger, and all the lower passions that incline you towards the earth. What then remains of the soul is what we call the image of intelligence, an image that radiates from intelligence, as from the immense globe of the sun radiates the surrounding luminary sphere. Detachment from all things here below, scorn of all earthly pleasures, and flight of the soul towards the divinity that she shall see face to face, that is, alone with the alone. If your soul does not succeed in enjoying this spectacle, if she does not have the intuition of the divine light, if she remains cold and does not within herself feel a rapture such as that of a lover who sees the beloved object and who rests within it, a rapture felt by him who has seen the true light and whose soul has been overwhelmed with brilliance on approaching this light, then you have tried to rise to the divinity without having freed yourself from the hindrances which arrest your progress and hinder your contemplation. You did not rise alone, and you retained within yourself something that separated you from him, or rather you were not yet unified. Though he be absent from all beings, he is absent from none, so that he is present to all without being present to them. He is present only for those who are able to receive him, and who are prepared for him, and who are capable of harmonizing themselves with him, to reach him, and as it were to touch him by virtue of the conformity they have with him, and also by virtue of an innate power analogous to that which flows from him, when at last their souls find themselves in the state where they were after having communicated with him. Then they can see him so far as his nature is visible. I repeat, if you have not yet risen so far, the conclusion must be that you are still at a distance from him, either by the obstacles of which we spoke above, or by the lack of such instruction as would have taught you the road to follow, and which would have imbued you with faith in things divine. In any case, you have no fault to find with any but yourself, for to be alone, all you need to do is to detach yourself from everything. Lack of faith in arguments about it may be remedied by the following considerations. The principal cause of our uncertainty is that our comprehension of the one comes to us neither by scientific knowledge nor by thought, as the knowledge of other intelligible things, but by a presence which is superior to science. When the soul acquires the scientific knowledge of something, she withdraws from unity and ceases being entirely one. For science implies discursive reason, and discursive reason implies manifoldness. To attain unity, we must therefore rise above science and never withdraw from what is essentially one. We must therefore renounce science, the objects of science, and every other right, except that of the one, even to that of beauty. For beauty is posterior to unity, and is derived therefrom, as the daylight comes from the sun. That is why Plato says of unity that it is unspeakable and indescribable. Nevertheless, we speak of it, we write about it, but only to excite our souls by our discussions, and to direct them towards this divine spectacle, just as one might point out the road to somebody who desired to see some object. Instruction indeed goes as far as showing the road and guiding us in the way, but to obtain the vision of this divinity is the work suitable to him who has desired to obtain it. Let us therefore contemplate this divinity who is not present here and absent there, but who is everywhere. All those who have any idea of the divinities admit that they, as well as that supreme divinity, are present everywhere. Reason compels this admission. Now, since the divinity is everywhere, he is not divided, otherwise he would not be present everywhere. The first principle may indeed be conceived of as a spring of water, which is its own origin, and which pours its water into many streams without itself becoming exhausted by what it yields, or even without running low, because the streams that it forms, before flowing away each in its own direction, and while knowing which direction it is to follow, yet mingles its waters with the spring. In short, the divinity is not outside of any being. On the contrary, he is present to all beings, though these may be ignorant thereof. This happens because they are fugitives, wandering outside of him, or rather outside of themselves. They cannot reach him from whom they are fleeing, nor, having lost themselves, can they find another being. A son, if angry and beside himself, is not likely to recognize his father. But he who will have learnt to know himself will at the same time discover from where he hails. Again, the supreme may be compared to the life that circulates in a great tree, without its principle issuing from the root, where is its seat, but which later divides among the branches. Though spreading everywhere a manifold life, the principle still dwells in itself exempt from all manifoldness, though being only its origin. In what sense do we use the name of unity, and how can we conceive of it? We shall have to insist that the one is a unity much more perfect than the point of the monad, for in these, abstracting geometric magnitude and numerical plurality, we do indeed stop at that which is most minute, and we come to rest in something indivisible. But this existed already in a divisible being, in a subject other than itself, while the one is neither in a subject other than itself, nor in anything divisible. If it be indivisible, neither is it of the same kind as that which is most minute. On the contrary, it is that which is greatest, not by geometric magnitude, but by power. Possessing no geometric magnitude, it is indivisible in its power. For the beings beneath it are indivisible in their powers, and not in their mass, since they are incorporeal. We must also insist that the one is infinite, not as would be a mass of a magnitude which could be examined serially, but by the incommensurability of its power. Even though you should conceive of it as of intelligence or divinity, it is still higher. When by thought you consider it as the most perfect unity, it is still higher. You try to form for yourself an idea of a divinity by rising to what in your intelligence is most unitary, and yet he is still simpler, for he dwells within himself and contains nothing that is contingent. As the universal soul possesses universal love, so do individual souls each possess her individual love. But as the individual souls are not separated from the universal soul, and are so contained within her that their totality forms but a single soul, so are individual loves contained within the universal love. On the other hand, each individual love is united to an individual soul, as universal love is united to the universal soul. The latter exists entirely everywhere in the universe, and so her unity seems multiple. She appears anywhere in the universe that she pleases, under the various forms suitable to her parts, and she reveals herself, at will, under some visible form. When we look outside of that on which we depend, we ignore our unity. Looking outward, we see many faces. Look inward, and all is one head. If a man could but be turned about, he would see at once God and himself, and the all. What then is unity? What is its nature? It is not surprising that it is so difficult to say so, when it is difficult to explain of what even essence or form consist. But nevertheless, forms are the basis of our knowledge. Everything that the soul advances towards what is formless, not being able to understand it because it is indeterminate and, so to speak, has not received the impression of a distinctive type, the soul withdraws therefrom, fearing she will meet nonentity. That is why, in the presence of such things, she grows troubled and descends with pleasure. Then, withdrawing therefrom, she, so to speak, lets herself fall till she meets some sense object, on which she pauses and recovers, just as the eye, which, fatigued by the contemplation of small objects, gladly turns back to large ones. When the soul wishes to see by herself, then seeing only because she is the object that she sees, and further being one because she forms but one with this object, she imagines that what she sought has escaped, because she herself is not distinct from the object that she thinks. Nevertheless, a philosophical study of unity will follow the following course. Since it is unity that we seek, since it is the principle of all things, the good, the first that we consider, those who will wish to reach it must not withdraw from that which is of primary rank to decline to what occupies the last, but they must withdraw their souls from sense objects, which occupy the last degree in the scale of existence, to those entities that occupy the first rank. Such a man will have to free himself from all evil, since he aspires to rise to the good. He will rise to the principle that he possesses within himself. From the manifold that he was, he will again become one. Only under these conditions will he contemplate the supreme principle, unity. Thus, having become intelligence, having trusted his soul to intelligence, educating and establishing her therein, so that with vigilant attention she may grasp all that intelligence sees, he will, by intelligence, contemplate unity, without the use of any senses, without mingling any of their perceptions with the flashes of intelligence. He will contemplate the purest principle, through the highest degree of the purest intelligence. So, when a man applies himself to the contemplation of such a principle and represents it to himself as a magnitude, or a figure, or even a form, it is not his intelligence that guides him in this contemplation. For intelligence is not destined to see such things. It is sensation, or opinion, the associate of sensation, which is active in him. Intelligence is only capable of informing us about things within its sphere. When we think and think ourselves, we see a thinking nature. Otherwise, we would be dupes of an illusion in believing we were thinking. Consequently, if we think ourselves, we are, by thinking ourselves, thinking an intellectual nature. This thought presupposes an anterior thought which implies no movement. Now, as the objects of thought are being and life, there must be, anterior to this being, another being, and anterior to this life, another life. This is well known to all who are actualized intelligences. Is love a divinity, a guardian, or a passion of the human soul? Or is it all three under different points of view? In this case, what is it under each of these points of view? These are the questions we are to consider, consulting the opinions of men, but chiefly those of the philosophers. Now, as we consider the soul which first radiates its light on heaven as separate from matter, we must admit that the love which is connected with her is likewise separate from matter. If we say that this pure soul really resides in heaven, it is in the sense in which we say that that which is most precious in us, the reasonable soul, resides in our body, and nevertheless is separate from matter. This love must therefore reside only there where resides this pure soul. But how shall we train this interior vision? At the moment of its first awakening, it cannot contemplate beauties too dazzling. Your soul must then first be accustomed to contemplate the noblest occupations of man, and then the beautiful deeds, not indeed those performed by artists, but those good deeds done by virtuous men. Later contemplate the souls of those who perform these beautiful actions. Nevertheless, how will you discover the beauty which their excellent soul possesses? Withdraw within yourself and examine yourself. If you do not yet therein discover beauty, do as the artist who cuts off, polishes, purifies until he has adorned his statue with all the marks of beauty. Remove from your soul, therefore, all that is superfluous, straighten out all that is crooked, purify and illuminate what is obscure, and do not cease perfecting your statue until the divine resplendence of virtue shines forth upon your sight, until you see temperance in its holy purity seated in your breast. When you shall have acquired this perfection, when you will see it in yourself, when you will purely dwell within yourself, when you will cease to meet within yourself any obstacle to unity, when nothing foreign will any more, by its admixture, alter the simplicity of your interior essence, when within your whole being you will be a veritable light, immeasurable in size, uncircumscribed by any figure within narrow boundaries, unincreasable because reaching out to infinity, and entirely incommensurable because it transcends all measure and quantity. When you shall have become such, then, having become sight itself, you may have confidence in yourself, for you will no longer need any guide. Then must you observe carefully, for it is only by the eye that then will open itself within you that you will be able to perceive supreme beauty. But if you try to fix on it an eye soiled by vice, an eye that is impure or weak, so as not to be able to support the splendor of so brilliant an object, that eye will see nothing, not even if it were shown a sight easy to grasp. The organ of vision will first have to be rendered analogous and similar to the object it is to contemplate. Never would the eye have seen the sun unless first it had assumed its form. Likewise, the soul could never see beauty unless she herself first became beautiful. To obtain the view of the beautiful and of the divinity, every man must begin by rendering himself beautiful and divine. Thus, in her ascension towards divinity, the soul advances until, having risen above everything that is foreign to her, she alone with him who is alone, beholds in all his simplicity and purity, him from whom all depends, to whom all aspires, from whom everything draws its existence, life, and thought. He who beholds him is overwhelmed with love, with ardor desiring to unite himself with him, entranced with ecstasy. Men who have not yet seen him desire him as the good. Those who have admire him as sovereign beauty, struck simultaneously with stupor and pleasure, thrilling in a painless orgasm, loving with a genuine emotion, with an ardor without equal, scorning all other affections, and disdaining those things which formerly they characterized as beautiful. This is the experience of those to whom divinities and guardians have appeared. They reck no longer of the beauty of other bodies. Imagine, if you can, the experiences of those who behold beauty itself, the pure beauty, which, because of its very purity, is fleshless and bodiless outside of earth and heaven. All these things indeed are contingent and composite. They are not principles, they are derived from him. What beauty could one still wish to see after having arrived at vision of him who gives perfection to all beings, though himself remains unmoved without receiving anything? After finding rest in this contemplation and enjoying it by becoming assimilated to him, being supreme beauty and the first beauty, he beautifies those who love him, and thereby they become worthy of love. This is the supreme goal of souls. This is the goal which arouses all their efforts. If they do not wish to be disinherited of that sublime contemplation, the enjoyment of which confers blessedness, and privation of which is the greatest of earthly misfortunes. A man who has achieved such a state no longer commits such faults, for he has become corrected. But his desired goal is not to cease failing, but to be divine. In case he still allows within himself the occurrence of some of the above-mentioned unreflecting impulses, he will be simultaneously divinity and guardian, a double being, or rather, he will contain a principle of another nature, intelligence, whose virtue will likewise differ from his. If, however, he be not troubled by any of those motions, he will be wholly divine. He will be one of those divinities who, as Plato said, form the attending escort of the first. It is a divinity of such a nature that has come down from above to dwell in us. To become again what one was originally is to live in this superior world. He who has achieved that height dwells with pure intelligence and assimilates himself thereto as far as possible.